Hey everyone, if you're on the channel now, just give us a couple minutes. We're going to wait for a few people to join and then we'll get right started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Graham Smith, and I'm running for the Board of Supervisors here in San Bernardino County's 3rd District. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening to join. I'm happy the days are getting a little bit longer, so you get a little bit of the beautiful District 3 sunset we get up here in the mountain region part of the district anyway. But thank you again for taking the time to join us tonight. I wanted to take this time to introduce myself. I've got a quick presentation to run through which tells you a little bit about the roles of supervisor, a bit of background on me, why I think I'm a good candidate for the job. But I want to make this session as interactive as possible. So whatever platform you've joined from, there's a chat window. Please feel free to drop in comments and questions as we go through. We'll take a couple breaks throughout the presentation to respond to some questions in real time. And if there's anyone you think who might be interested in watching either now or later, please feel free to pass the link to anyone who you think might want to join. And if they can't join the live session, don't worry, all of these sessions get recorded and get posted both to Facebook and YouTube. So there's plenty to go through later if people have missed it. So why don't we kick right off? So I've got a little presentation I want to run through. And I want to start this off by actually talking about what the role of a county supervisor is, because I'm conscious this isn't necessarily a household name, and it's certainly not a sexy position on the ballot. So I think about this in four main buckets: approving the budget, allocating resources, approving legislation, and securing investment. So if you didn't know, San Bernardino County has about a $10 billion annual budget. It's a pretty big number, and the person sitting in this seat has got to be really financially literate and comfortable dealing with a budget of that size. Allocating resources. Sitting underneath the county that is San Bernardino are dozens of county departments. Each one of them operates a little bit differently, and a huge part of the role of supervisor is figuring out what resources those departments need and what would make those departments run a little bit better. Approving legislation. A lot of the role of the county supervisor, or the board of supervisors rather, is really to refine legislation that gets passed down by either the federal government or the state of California. What often happens is when the state of California passes a piece of legislation, it's left purposely vague so that counties and cities can figure out how to implement it in ways that work best for them. I'll talk later about how that's challenging here because San Bernardino County is huge and District 3 is one of the biggest districts in the county. And last but certainly not least, the Board of Supervisors has got to secure investment. The single biggest source of funding for our county is reimbursements from the state and federal government, and we also need to attract outside industries to the county to make sure we've got a thriving and robust economy. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what the role actually is. Now I want to switch over and talk about what my background is and tell you how, actually I think my professional background is really relevant to do this job. So I've had 2 phases to my career. Most of it was spent in the corporate world, working in what I'm going to call big finance. And then I decided at one point I didn't want to do corporate work forever, and I started a couple small businesses. So in my finance career, I worked for two pretty big companies. They're not necessarily household names. One was called Lehman Brothers, the other was called Ares Management. That's where I spent most of my career. And in my job, I was investing money, but it's actually a lot more than that. So in my day-to-day job, I would go out to various stakeholders, raise money for a company fund, and then figure out how to allocate that money across hundreds of different companies. Now, I was what was called a generalist, which meant I looked at companies in all kinds of different sectors. I started making a list the other day. I got up to over 40, and then I stopped counting. And what that means is I've got a little bit of sector knowledge in all kinds of different industries, and certainly a lot of the industries that make up our county here in San Bernardino, and also some knowledge about some of the departments that sit within our overall county. And then in my small business career, I started a couple small businesses. One was an online health and fitness startup. Another was a topical CBD brand I started with a friend of mine from finance. And that really gave me an appreciation for just how hard it is to be a small business owner, and in particular, how hard it is to be a small business owner here in San Bernardino County. I'll talk a little bit later on about what the small business environment is like in San Bernardino. I certainly want to hear your thoughts if you have experience with this as well. I live in what's considered or what's called an unincorporated part of San Bernardino County, and let me tell you, small business here is not easy. And I've got some ideas on how I think we can improve the environment here. So now I want to go back to the actual roles of a county supervisor and tell you how my professional experience really fits in with this role. So first of all, approving the budget. In my professional career, I personally raised and invested about $10 billion, and the last firm I worked for manages about $400 billion. It's about 4 times the size of the GDP of this entire county. So in terms of dealing with the size and scale of numbers we're talking about here, this is something I'm really comfortable with. Allocating resources. So I kind of see this county budget as a lot like managing a big investment fund. A big part of my job was figuring out where to invest all this money in all these different companies, how to allocate that money to make everything as efficient as possible. And I feel like if we had a supervisor who had a bit more in-depth knowledge on how that's done, we'd be seeing a more efficient county overall. I think the point on improving legislation that I want to get across to people is that this environment is pretty fast-paced. And I've certainly seen some of the existing supervisors complain that they don't have enough time to review legislation and review materials before they have to vote and opine on it. One thing I've really tried to do as part of this campaign, and if you haven't followed the campaign on social media yet, I really encourage you to do so, because one thing we've done is we've really taken a lot of the hot button issues that we face in San Bernardino County, and particularly here in District 3. We've tried to provide full and complete feedback on all those issues to give you a preview on exactly how I'll behave if I'm sitting in that seat, and also prove to you that I can work to the timetables that are required in this role. Last but certainly not least is securing investment. This is a huge part of the career that I used to do. We as San Bernardino, our single biggest source of funding for our $10 billion budget is reimbursements from the state of California and the federal government. So a big part of this job is selling San Bernardino County to these various institutions, and also selling San Bernardino County to private industries to get them to come and set up shop here. This is a huge part of my professional career and something I can do really, really well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about District 3, but I'm going to pause for a sec here to see if we've got any questions in the chat.
No questions just yet, but like I say, there's for anyone who doesn't know, I'm so sorry, my name is Mark, I'm Graham's campaign manager, the disembodied voice. I am running things behind the scenes, that's why you can't see me. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know that there's a 20-second delay or so on the video, so if you have your questions, please send them in now. And any comments, like Graham said, we want to make this as conversational as possible, so yeah, put your comments in the chat and we'll respond to them as and when they come up.
Okay, so let me tell you a little about District 3, because if you are joining from one of the regions that we're advertising to tonight, so Loma Linda, Grand Terrace, or Colton, it's sometimes easy to forget when you're in a city in this county just how big this place is. So if you didn't know already, San Bernardino County is geographically the largest county in the entire US. It is 20,000 square miles, and the district that we all sit in, District 3, is about half the size of San Bernardino County. So if you look on the little graphic we have here, it's also the most diverse. We've got urban areas like the ones you're most likely joining from. We've got mountain areas like the ones where I live. I live up in the San Bernardino Mountains just outside of Lake Arrowhead. And we've got a huge part of the district that is desert. And even within these regions, no two areas are the same. So one issue we've found in terms of the way the county has managed District 3 thus far is a one-size approach really does not work here. And that's true even within the urban regions, within the mountain regions, and within desert regions. So managing this place is actually a pretty big challenge. And I almost like to say that this district is much bigger than it should be, just given how big it is and how diverse it is. So we've got a couple points here that I just kind of talked through. So I think really the challenge with District 3 is making sure that supervisor is really well connected to everyone in each one of these different areas, and making sure we've got a strong view on what's important to local residents. Because I made the point before around legislation as for instance, the state of California being vague so that it can be implemented in a way that works for everybody. We really need to take a lot of time to figure out how to implement simple things like trash collection changes from cities to mountain areas to desert areas. So let me switch gears, unless we've got any questions in the chat. I'm going to switch gears now and talk about some of my county-wide priorities, and then I'm going to zoom in a little bit and talk about some of my local priorities. The ones I'll talk about now are more specific to residents in the city. So if you're thinking about what's important to you right now, definitely drop it in the chat so we can have a discussion about it when we get there. So as it relates to the county overall, I certainly have more than 4 things that are on my agenda. And if you haven't yet, please check out the website, because we've got a really comprehensive list of issues, proposed solutions, and those span urban areas, mountain areas, desert areas. We're really trying to look at everything as comprehensively as we can. But looking at the county as a whole, one thing I really want to focus on is financial responsibility. It's hard to, you will probably know if you read the papers here, it's hard to go a couple weeks without seeing some headlines in the papers around alleged financial misconduct. I mean, over the years, alleged corruption. Just last week, the county was sued again by the state of California for some mismanagement of homeless funding. I really think it's important that we start to get a handle on our finances. Of all the candidates running, and indeed of all the current board members, I have the best background in order to deliver on that promise. Economic diversity. If you hear me talk in person, one thing I talk about a lot is, as a county right now, we are really putting all of our eggs in one basket. And if you look at the economy of San Bernardino County, by far and away, the biggest sector we have here is transport and logistics. And there's nothing intrinsically bad about transport and logistics, but the problem we're creating for ourselves is we made it a really, really big part of our economy. And it's far and away the single biggest employment sector in San Bernardino County. And I think that's a problem, because if and when the broader economy takes a turn, we are going to feel that hit extra hard here, because we are so focused on this one sector. And then also, one thing you hear me talk about when I talk in person is so many of the employees who work in the transport and logistics sector today are first in line to get replaced by automated technology. It's hard to go a couple weeks without seeing Amazon release a new warehouse worker robot, which they claim isn't going to take any human jobs. I'm not sure I totally agree with that. And I think we need to start planning for a scenario where we're going to see big layoffs in this space. Personally, I think the way that we can help plan for this scenario is by starting to attract other industries to San Bernardino County. These are all ideas that I want to spend more time exploring. One idea here is some big investments in renewable energy, particularly on space that's been disturbed already. A good starting point for that is actually warehouse roofs. We've got 1 billion square feet of warehouse space in the Inland Empire. Right now, hardly any of it is covered with either solar panels or any kind of renewable energy generating technology. They're actually supposed to, just given some current regulations, and they're not in compliance today. So that's one thing I want to at least start exploring and make some big investments in. Right now, our relationship as a county with the state of California, the federal government, isn't all that great. And I say that because I don't know if you will have remembered from the 2022 ballot, but the current Board of Supervisors actually put a measure on the ballot to study secession from the state of California. Now, the intention behind that was true in the sense that it was meant to be kind of a threat to the state of California to say, give us some more resources or else. I think the problem with that approach is that threat's kind of empty because San Bernardino County ultimately is only about 3% of California's GDP. So it's a pretty toothless threat. I think it also makes us look just a little bit silly and a little bit childish in the eyes of California legislators. So one thing I'm really focused on is finding some more productive ways to work with the state of California and the federal government really as a way to try to bring us more funding back to the county of San Bernardino. I think things like renewable energy investment, electrification of some of our heavy vehicle fleet are really interesting ways to think about doing that. I also think it's kind of the right thing to do because if you didn't know already, we've got the worst air quality ranking in the entire US, literally #1 top of the list. And I personally think it's time that we start looking at ways to at least get ourselves down to #2. Last but certainly not least, I think we've got a big job and opportunity to restore trust between residents of the county and local government. Back to the point I made earlier on about constant headlines around alleged financial misconduct, alleged corruption, I feel like it's easy as a resident in San Bernardino County to feel like this government just does not have your back. I feel this really personally as a resident of an unincorporated part of the county, and I'll talk a little bit later about why I'm actually stepping up to run for this seat right now. But as a resident in unincorporated San Bernardino, it's really easy to feel like you've been forgotten about and like the county doesn't have your back. So I'm really committed to an unparalleled level of transparency and accountability if elected to this seat. One thing I really would commit to you is if elected to this seat, I want to keep doing sessions like this to tell you exactly what's happening in local government, tell you exactly where things are going, why we're voting the way we're voting, and give you some real insight into what's going on. So I'm going to move on to some local priorities focused on urban areas. But any questions or comments in the chat so far?
Not yet, but I just want to encourage everyone as we're going through these topics, which we think kind of focus a little bit more on exactly where you are as opposed to the county as a whole. Any experience you've had with any of these issues, please pop those in the chat and we can discuss them. And also any topics that you don't see talked about here, bring them up. I think we've tried to run a very comprehensive campaign. By that I mean we've looked into and we've thought about and we've come out with opinion pieces on a lot of different topics, not just the 4 that are shown here. So yeah, feel free to ask any and all questions that you have. Just pop them in the chat on whichever platform you're watching this on, and we'll get to those comments.
Yes, please do. And like I said, this is certainly not an exhaustive list. This is just a few to get us started. And again, I would refer back to the website, back to social media, where we talk about all kinds of issues across the district. So talking to residents in more urban areas of District 3, these 4 issues are ones that keep coming up on a recurring basis. I touched on warehouses already, as it relates to some of the county-wide priorities. I think we need to do a better job as a county trying to put. I know you can argue this is a little bit too little, too late because we already have so many of them, and so many of them are right in the middle of local neighborhoods. There are some pieces of proposed legislation out of the state of California to try to put a little bit more distance between new warehouses and residential areas, and I'm certainly a proponent of trying to do that. I think we are suffering from a huge amount of traffic, a huge amount of pollution, and that's right in our neighborhoods. It's across the street from churches, it's across the street from schools, and I want to do my part to put a little more distance there. The next 3 I really think are interlinks: crime, homelessness, and affordable housing. Skipping order a little bit, talking about homelessness first. The county has allocated a huge amount of money. It's about $73 million just for focusing on homelessness issues. And what we've seen is that happened about a year ago, and in the subsequent time, the county started spending money on various initiatives, and in the same time, homelessness continued to creep up. Again, related with those issues are the things I was talking about a couple minutes ago. We've had homelessness funding returned because it wasn't spent properly. We're now getting sued by the state of California over misallocations of state homeless funding. It was only a few months ago that the Board of Supervisors actually decided to set up a subcommittee to start understanding the root causes of homelessness. And one thing that I'll really commit to you is I am the type of person, and this comes out of my professional career. I want to do the work and I want to understand the problem before we start throwing money at it. I think we've proven through our experience here in San Bernardino County, the former strategy doesn't work, and in order to solve homelessness effectively, it's going to come down to not just spending money on it, but really getting input from all kinds of stakeholders across multiple different parts of this county. Whether it's talking to the Sheriff's Department to address the crime aspect, mental health, drug addiction. There are so many factors that contribute to our homelessness issue here. And I think one of the things we really need to do is just understand exactly what those are and focus on finding some solutions that actually make sense. So crime is one of the offshoots of having a pretty bad homeless problem here in the county. One thing I can really bring to this role is, I think a lot of candidates will try to brand themselves as the law enforcement choice or the public safety choice. I think it's a little bit disingenuous because no one's not for law enforcement, no one's not for public safety. I think one thing I know is that the best way to get both of those things better in a better county overall is to make sure that all of those departments are really well funded. So my professional expertise is really taking a hard look at this $10 billion budget, making sure money is going where it's supposed to, and making sure these various departments and various stakeholders in the county have the resources they need to do their jobs really, really well. And then lastly, on affordable housing, this was actually the subject of one of the recent lawsuits. I think we need to do a better job as a county of trying to establish more of it. This isn't just an issue in urban areas, by the way. We have similar issues with this up here in the mountains, and I think there's no perfect answer to this, but I think the solution is going to come from looking at a couple of different aspects. Whether that is some reforms to zoning laws to allow for more mixed-use zoning, fast tracking approvals, just making it easier to build affordable housing here. To my mind, this is a little bit like the small business problem we have in San Bernardino County, where if you're a resident, particularly up here in an unincorporated area, and you try to open a small business, the number of hurdles you have to jump over and the amount of red tape you have to get through is absolutely insane. And I think we need to cut down on some of that burdensome admin and make some of this stuff easier. Okay, do we have a
We do.
question in the chat?
We do. So there's a question from Jim who says, thanks for mentioning the Mammoth logistics and transport presence. How do we attract manufacturing, which used to be a huge sector in the San Bernardino Valley, and tech like Esri? So, you talked about attracting new industries. How do we actually do that?
Yeah. So one, this is where someone like me and my professional background actually think comes in really, really helpful. So one thing I haven't talked too much about is I mentioned the firm I used to work for. So Ares Management, it's called, manages $400 billion across all kinds of different companies and all kinds of different industries. But in addition to just being connected to my former employer, through that professional network, I'm connected to so many more companies that look similar, and collectively they manage trillions of dollars of companies. So one, there's a really easy in to get talking to some of these companies and convince them that San Bernardino is a good place to be. Two, if you followed the news recently, you'll see some of the federal incentives for getting manufacturing back in the U.S. I would really like to do our part to work as a county with the state of California and with the federal government to try to bring some of that manufacturing back here. We've seen big pushes in the semiconductor manufacturing industry. We've seen big pushes in the solar panel manufacturing industry, not just installation of solar panels. So I think it comes down to having the right connections into some of these industries, knowing how to start the conversation, which again, this is something I spent the bulk of my professional career doing, and then working with these various state and federal agencies to make sure that we are accessing all the possible incentives and programs we can to give companies a real reason to come here and set up shop.
Yeah, I just want to add something that we've been talking a lot about recently, and this is sort of across a lot of the different topics that we've talked about, is the regulatory environment that needs to be in place in order for those businesses to want to come here, right? So you've talked a little bit already tonight about, how some of those regulations need to change for affordable housing and for small business. Do you see this as kind of part of that same process?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you haven't checked already, I actually posted a video about this on well all the social media platforms, I think last week, talking about looking at other jurisdictions in the United States who have created really business friendly environments. And the example I talked about last week was Ohio, in the sense that they've created a business friendly environment. They've tried to simplify their tax structure as much as possible. And what that's meant is a lot of people have actually wanted to move to Ohio because they've created an environment that's friendly. And when I say friendly, I want to make sure that I'm getting the point across that I don't think a business friendly environment means that businesses necessarily need to take things over. I'm really conscious of what the warehouse industry has done to this county, and I don't want to see that happen again with something else. But I do think there's a really interesting balance we can strike where we create an environment that really incentivizes people to move here. And if we're doing that in a way that's as positive as possible, then those workers are being well compensated. People want to move to San Bernardino County. And to Mark's point, we also have to think about this in the context of affordable housing. Do people have places to live? Are our cities ones that people actually want to come and spend time in? So I think it's taking that whole holistic approach and making sure we get the businesses and then we get the people because they see this as a really interesting place to be.
Actually, I think that's a really interesting point because one of the things that we've seen this county do over the past is to focus so intensely on one particular aspect, say, generating new revenue and creating jobs through warehouses without thinking about the impact on the wider community. So housing is a great point to mention there. Also, if you're going to, create a new industry that's going to create a lot of jobs, maybe some of those people, some of that workforce is going to come from outside the county. Do we have things for the family members of those people to do? So it really does require kind of a holistic approach. You also mentioned, drawing inspiration from places outside of the county. Jim, in his question, mentions Esri, which, as we know, is kind of like a homegrown tech giant. So, there's inspiration and lessons that we can learn from companies that have grown right here in the county. So, a wealth of learning opportunities to do this right.
Exactly, and as much as I like to talk about things in this county that need to change, I think it's sometimes also important to take a step back and look at the things that this county has done really well. You make the point about Esri. We have a lot of really vibrant neighborhoods in San Bernardino County. A lot of them happen to be in some of the incorporated areas where you have city councils and city managers who've got a real vested interest in making that location as good as it possibly can be. So yeah, it's really drawing inspiration from everywhere. Okay, so now let me give you a little bit of background just on me as a person, because I want you to know that I'm just a normal guy doing this because I want to try to help. So on my personal background, I've had a lifelong connection to San Bernardino, and actually in particular to the 3rd District. So I was actually born in a neighborhood called Topanga outside of LA, if anyone's ever heard of that. But the house that I'm talking to you from this evening, my grandparents built 50 years ago. We've got a family campsite down in the desert in Lucerne Valley. So I've been spending a lot of time in this district my whole life. But I haven't always lived here, and I actually think that's a real benefit. Because one thing I really think I bring to this role, and that I think is really important, is a sense of perspective. Because I think as a member sitting on that board of supervisors, you're not there just to say yes to everything. You got to provide both perspective and challenge, both from work and life experiences that you've had. So I'm, full disclosure, I'm 40 years old, so I've been around the block a little bit. I spent 12 years of my both personal and professional career living and working in London. So a lot of the experience I had at the last firm I told you about called Ares happened in London. And through that experience, I did business in 5 different continents, traveled to 50 different countries, So through that work and life experience, I've got a really wide breadth of experience that I hope to bring back to this role and back to this county. I stayed in LA for school. I went to USC and studied finance and accounting. So I've got a business and finance brain, which again I think is really, really important and helpful for this role. And like I said, I'm just a normal guy. I like to cook in my spare time, tinker in my workshop. I'm just a regular old guy. So on that note, I've never had any political aspirations. This was not part of my life plan. And I think that's important because if you've watched any of my content on social media, I talk a lot about how I think career politicians, not just in San Bernardino County, but across the country, are kind of screwing things up for everyone. I don't think it's necessarily a political party thing. I think it's important now we have some fresh perspectives and some fresh blood coming into this scene. So I never thought about doing this until we moved here. So we've lived full-time now in the San Bernardino Mountains for about 4 years. And in that time, we realized just how difficult the county can make life for people. Again, particularly I come at this from the perspective of being a resident in an unincorporated part of the county. But whether it's basic services like trash pickup, or it comes to improving your house, opening a small business, San Bernardino County can make life pretty tough for you as a resident. And then for me, it really reached a boiling point, or my frustration reached a boiling point last winter. So I'm sure you probably saw in the news or read in the paper all of the crazy winter storms we had last year. So up here in the mountains, we got buried in 10 to 12 feet of snow in a week. The county really wasn't saying anything for the better part of a week. It actually took a whole coordinated social media campaign just to get their attention. And that was when I really reached my boiling point. And I really stepped up for my local community during that time. I got the attention of Supervisor Rao, the person I'm now running against. Really brought us all some more communication, some more resources. And that was the first time that I really kind of felt the desire to step up more properly for my community. So that's kind of my origin story anyway. So I'll sum up with a couple final points. In the meantime, if you've got any final questions or comments, please drop them in the chat. But just a few quick points on me. I mean, one, I really think I'm the most qualified candidate to do this job. This is a heavily financial job, and right now it's done by people who don't have a financial background. And I think that's a problem in the context of we're now entering an environment where the state of California has got a $68 billion budget deficit. Getting more resources from the state is going to be harder than ever. And I really think we need someone in this position who really understands how to lobby people to get investment. Every department in this county really has a benefit from my skill set. Like I said before, I was a generalist, which meant I looked at companies in all kinds of different sectors. And really my core specialty is knowing how to allocate money and resources among all those different sectors or companies to make them operate as efficiently as they possibly can. I think I've proven through the whole campaign, and if you haven't seen it yet, again, please follow on social media. In this race in particular, I'm the only candidate that talks about any kind of issues, and I'm certainly the only candidate that does that with any kind of urgency or accuracy. And certainly last but not least, even though I don't live in Loma Linda, Grand Terrace, or Colton, I've lived in cities before. I've lived in LA, I've lived in London. I live in the mountain regions now. I spend a lot of time in the desert. And I think a big part and a big challenge of this role is being able to connect with people in each of the places across San Bernardino County, and in particular San Bernardino's 3rd District. This is by far the most diverse one. And through those collection of life and work experiences, I think I've got a better connection to the very diverse regions we have here than anyone else you're going to see. So I'm going to pause now for a break and see if we've got any questions or comments in the chat.
No, I think we have thoroughly answered everyone's questions. No more questions have come through, but Maybe you could tell people if they haven't seen enough of you tonight and want to ask some questions of you in person, where can they go?
Yes, if you aren't bored to death already and you feel like coming out this evening, we're kind of going through this one quickly because we are just about to head out down to Redlands. There's actually a candidate forum, so it's also an opportunity to meet some of the other candidates and compare, contrast. So if you're interested in all, the details for that are on our social media. It's at the University of Redlands, 7 p.m. tonight, totally free event to attend. So hope to see you there. And then if you can't make that one, we'll keep the schedule of in-person events as up to date as possible on social media. So we should have an opportunity to see you sometime soon. And then my final call always is, if any of this sounds interesting to you, this is a completely grassroots campaign. We're not taking any corporate donations. I think that's really important, particularly in San Bernardino County, given some of the issues we've had before. And I really want to make sure that when elected to this seat, I can come in with a huge degree of independence and be free to operate for the people of San Bernardino County and not on behalf of some of the big corporate donors. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, there's a QR code to donate to the campaign on this slide here. And there's also links to the website on social media and to the donation platform on both social media and the website. So unless there's any final wrap-up comment, I think we'll close it up, say goodnight, and then maybe see people in another hour and 20 minutes or so.
Yeah. Just to make a note, if as Graham mentioned, if you like anything you've heard tonight and you want other people to be aware that we're running more of these virtual town halls, we do have another session focused on Loma Linda, Grand Terrace, and Colton residents. Currently, it's scheduled, we didn't realize this when we did it, but currently it's scheduled for 6 to 7 p.m. on Valentine's Day.
That might change.
That might change, yeah. But maybe not. So we'll keep you updated. But as of right now, if you don't have a hot date on Valentine's Day, now you do. 6 to 7 p.m. Come, we'll be doing another town hall. Like I say, depending on the feedback we get from residents in that area, we might move that. But for right now, just make a mental note that if you have friends and neighbors, family members who might be interested in hearing Graham talk from the comfort of their own home, then let them know that 6 to 7 p.m. on Wednesday, February 14th, is our next session for Loma Linda, Grand Terrace, and Colton.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining this evening. And if you're not going to join the next session, feel free to refer back to this one. It'll get recorded online, and we've got a bunch more across the district. So for now, we'll say goodnight and hopefully see you soon. All right, everyone, take care.